So
Just
you
two
all have
quick
your
things
mics.
before I get off stage. I would like to thank our partners, the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, and the book that is now launched is available for sale outside and at all leading bookshops. This evening, if you get yourself a copy, Rajdeep will be here to sign copies if you would like to get it signed. Thank you. Over to you, Rajdeep.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Udayan. Yes, we also have an audio book coming out on the 11th of December. Something new that one has to try. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of this discussion. We have a panel of extremely eminent parliamentarians, political watchers, people who've seen Indian elections far longer than I have. And so thank you to each and every one of you for being here. P. Chidambaram, Dinesh Trivedi, Asad Owaisi, Yogendra Yadav, and Mahua Moitra. I'm grateful that each and every one of you is here on the launch of my book. So thank you. Please give them a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. We've had an election year like no other, not just in India, but across the world. More than 60 democracies across the world went to polls in 2024. So it's been quite a remarkable year. And a year that perhaps has seen more surprises than most. Most people thought that 2024 was a done deal. The BJP came to power, but with a fractured verdict. We thought Haryana was a done deal for the Congress party for once. And the Congress party lost that. And then we had Maharashtra, where some of us could see that one side was winning, but I don't think anyone predicted quite the tsunami that took place in Maharashtra. So I want to ask each and every one of you at the very outset, what's your biggest takeaway from this year 2024? What is it that, what does it tell you about elections in this country in particular? Why don't you start, Mr. Chidambaram? Since you probably contested an election well before anyone else of us on this table. 1984 or 89 probably. Yes, sir, it's working.
Let me say in one sentence, the electorate has moved to the right. And what is the dominant impulse of the electorate is religion and culture. Religio-cultural impulses are driving the electorate. And like in many other countries of the world, the Indian electorate has markedly shifted to the right.
That's a huge confession to make. Effectively accepting that you've got left behind. In a way.
I'm not saying we left behind. The electorate has moved to the right. And it is highly polarized. So we have a task, but an uphill task. We have to redouble our efforts.
Okay. Dinesh Trivedi, your short first big takeaway from what you've seen in Indian elections from a perspective of the right.
संविधान दिवस की बहुत-बहुत शुभकामनाएं सबको. के बाद में ताली हो जाए क्योंकि there is no GST on ताली. I must confess one thing. I've launched the book, but I don't take any responsibility of it. और Rajdeep is very conjuice. I thought he's going to send me a book, and I am also a Gujarati Bengali. I didn't want to spend the money because I knew that I'm going to get it free. So I have not read the book, but coming back to your question, I think this was a fantastic election. And this election, everybody thought that they have won the election. जो हारा वो भी समझा हम जीत गए. And the party which won was made to feel that they have lost the election. So the beauty of this democracy, the vibrant democracy, that everybody was happy in 24 election. I don't know about the media, but I think everybody felt that, yes, this election was nice and we have all won. So that is the most exciting part of 24 election.
Okay, interesting. Asaduddin Owaisi, what's your biggest takeaway? Not just the general elections, but this big election year, which in a way has now got shadowed by what we saw in the last 2 months in Haryana, Jharkhand, Maharashtra, and Jammu and Kashmir as well.
This 24 parliament elections, followed by Haryana, J&K, Maharashtra, and the Jharkhand. I feel it's a victory and victory of Hindutva. The secular parties giving up their secular ideologies, if they had. And thirdly, the otherization of minorities, in particular the Muslims. These are the three important takeaways which I take from 24 general elections to Kashmir, and then followed by Haryana, Maharashtra, and Jharkhand.
What do you mean by the otherization of Muslims?
Because it is very easy for any political party, especially the BJP, to create a fear of Muslims amongst the majority community. And secondly, you have these secular parties also very reluctant, apprehensive to talk about the political empowerment of the Muslims. And that is why you see that in your book which you have written, you only have 24 Muslim members of parliament getting elected, whereas the other backward class community and the upper caste community are well represented up to their population. So this is also a big takeaway.
Okay. Yogendra Yadav, your big takeaway from this dramatic election year.
Rajdeep, we live in an age, and not just in India, where it's getting increasingly useless to describe countries as democracy or not democracy. I think there are hybrid regimes all over. Democracy is not a state of affairs. Democracy is a momentary affair. So in moments you feel, maybe I experienced democracy, then it just goes away. That's what this year was. And to my mind, the real significance of this election was that there was this was not an election really. This was a plebiscite. And the plebiscite sought to change the nature of Indian state. Not from democracy to dictatorship. I think these are not very meaningful categories. For the last 10 years, we have been competitive authoritarianism of the kind that you have in Turkey, of the kind that you have in Hungary, and of the kind that we almost had in Sri Lanka. And 24 election was an attempt to change it from competitive authoritarianism to electoral autocracy of the kind that we have in Russia. And the significance of 24 election is that the people of India said no in this plebiscite. That to me is the real outcome of this election, not the 240 seats, not who forms the government, but the fact is that, because in a plebiscite it's either yes or no. And the people of India said no. And Rajdeep, one of the things that you say in your book, I think it's a very deeply analytical point, and people might see it just as a journalistic flourish. So I just want to underline it, that the credit for this must not go to any political party, not to any of the dominant opposition parties. The credit in the last instance must go to the people that they stopped this slide. But it is just they've just applied brakes. We have not reversed yet. And the last 4 assembly elections are very painful reminders that our republic, which was going just down the drain, the people have applied brakes. We have not reversed. And the task of resuming the journey to the Subah wo jo kabhi aayegi still remains.
I call it that we are in an intermission at the moment in Indian politics in a strange way. And Indians, when you go for an intermission, you come out of the darkness into the light to take a break, and maybe we are taking that break. But Mahua Moitra, your big takeaway for someone who this has been a rather tumultuous year, 2024.
Thanks, Rajdeep. Listening to everyone, and I think coming from a math background, I think it says 2024, the election that changed India.
That surprised
I think
India.
I would like to keep this to the parliamentary election and not go into the state elections either before or after the parliamentary election. So let's keep it to the parliamentary election. I have gone through 2 Lok Sabha elections in my life, the first in 19 and the second in 24. And if I were to compare the two, I would agree with Yogendra ji in saying that 19, I think, was an election that really, to me, brought out sort of, I reached a point where I couldn't recognize my country, honestly, to be fair. And in 24, the answer, in 24, the democratization of media was something that was starkly different from 2019. So in 2019, we had TV, we had WhatsApp, we had all of that. In 2024, what was different was that, yes, there was Godi media, yes, there were paid news anchors, but YouTubers and like every single person had access to and decided they were going to play a part in changing it. So this democratization of media was something that we saw in 24. The second thing was that came out of this election, of the 24 election, was that this was a vote, you can agree with me or not, but I believe this was a yes or no vote against Mr. Modi. Everything was about Mr. Modi, and the election was fought on his name. And in that way, if we look at it, this was a vote against Mr. Modi. The country didn't give him 272. It was fought on Mr. Modi. It was fought at keeping him as the leader, and the country didn't give the BJP 272. So I think this was the big takeaway. They've applied the brakes. Now, whether you're fighting for Maharashtra under Fadnavis and winning, or you're fighting Haryana under, I don't even know who and winning, no problem. But India under Mr. Modi, and in that kind of one-person scenario, we've definitely seen the brakes. And that, to me, is a good thing.
Okay, some of you are choosing that 2024 verdict to take your takeaway, and that's, of course, where my book stems from. But much as water has flown under the bridge between June and November, Mr. Chidambaram, the same Maharashtra where the opposition got, 30 out of 48, and the BJP alliance gets 17, now has the BJP effectively sweeping the state with its allies in a manner which is unprecedented. Does that suggest, as some are suggesting, that 2024 was an aberration? And the mistake the Congress party made is to confuse 99 seats with 272. If the BJP thought 240 was equivalent to 400 possibly, y'all made the bigger mistake of confusing 99 seats with 272. So actually, the dominance of the BJP remains. 2024 is an aberration.
When you invited me to speak on your book on the 2024 election, I replied to you, it's 2024 elections absolute. So we can't freeze time in May, June 2020. Much has happened after that. Which is why I say that you have to look at the entire 2024 and all the elections that have taken place. Please remember, as far as Mr. Modi is concerned and the government is concerned, their behavior after winning 240 is no different from after winning 303. 240 and 303 are the same number. They won the election. They formed the government for a third time. And their behavior, I don't see material difference. Go through this book and all the aberrations that Rajdeep has listed. They continue after the parliament election. What has changed? Has the ED changed? Has the media changed? Has the presiding officers of the two houses of parliament, have they changed? Has the ECI changed? Has the income tax department changed? Has black money changed? The role of black money changed? Nothing has changed. In fact, we delude ourselves in believing there was a major change was brought about by the 240 seats in the election. We hoped it would bring about a major change. But as far as I can see, there's hardly any change before 240 and after 240 in the way this country is run, in the way the institutions are behaving.
I'm going to get Dinesh Trivedi to respond, but sir, if you can just say, isn't the problem that the Congress party thought change had taken place, that you mistook that 99 for 272? You thought Mr. Modi had been defeated. Today, 5 months later, you're being extremely introspective. I didn't see your party being as introspective in June of 2024. Then they were celebrating.
You read my column immediately after the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. I caution that this cannot be construed or misconstrued as a shattering defeat for Modi or an outright win for the opposition. Read my column.
Okay, maybe your party should read the column. But we won't make this. You know, the easiest thing is to do Congress bashing. I know. So that's the soft target. But you want to respond, Mr. Trivedi?
No, it's very clear that, nothing has changed. The opposition has thankfully not changed either. They just remain in denial mode. And the government, if you talk about, if you don't want to see the change, it's not only the change in the party. Look at India. And I'm not talking just as a BJP person. India has definitely changed. You look at all the youngsters. What has changed is the dream. Now the youngster can dream to become a Pichai. He can dream to become an icon. He can dream to become whatever. You look at that 13-year-old kid which is going to play in IPL. I don't know whether it's good, bad or ugly. Now, Bumrah, yesterday we celebrated his victory. Now, please understand, it never happened overnight. It took him a lot of practice. It took a great leadership in the captain. And the captain had a great team. And we as audience applauded that. So when we go to see politics is 24/7. It is not only during the election time. So a student does well who studies all the days, not just during the exam. And I think it's time. As far as I am concerned, I would like to see absolutely a vibrant opposition. It's a very good thing to have a vibrant opposition. But it is not the job of BJP to create a vibrant opposition. They're trying their best, but it's not happening. It's just not happening.
No, but he raised issues which were institutional. He said election commission has not changed, enforcement directorate has not changed.
They were democratic and they are still democratic. And if you feel
you actually believe that the ED works to a level playing field.
If you have some serious thing, just after losing the election, if you say the EVMs were bad, now if BJP won only 240 instead of 300 or whatever, then the election machinery was okay. When the EC was okay. So I think there is a case where you need to do your homework and where you have to prove the thing. If supposing EVMs are not working well, then there are big brains all over the country. They must come up and prove a thing. Just by saying that it doesn't work. So all I'm trying to say, that let's not be in a denial mode. Narendra Modi today is one of the most popular world leaders. Can you imagine you're having a war in Ukraine and Russia? Both Russia and Ukraine stopped the war. Right? They stopped the war. They stopped the war and let our student go.
Okay. Okay, let me for a moment, just a minute. He raised Yogendra Yadav, he raised an important point about EVMs. Just a minute. Please. He raised an important point about EVMs in the context of Maharashtra also. I'm hearing suddenly leaders saying something is wrong with the EVMs, opposition leaders. You've written a piece where you're saying you're not an EVM skeptic, but you're still wondering whether there should be some election forensics now around EVMs. Don't you think that that is part of the problem? This is the denial mode that Dinesh Trivedi says. The opposition is not willing to concede that maybe things are changing on the ground. Maybe in Maharashtra, there were new equations that were built, whether it's through money power, whether it's through the outreach of the RSS, working among Hindu Dalits, working among OBCs. Is the opposition living in denial when it targets EVMs? Do you really believe something is wrong with EVMs?
Rajdeep, one of the absolutely bare minimum of the possibility of democracy is that both sides should accept the electoral outcome, which does not happen in Pakistan anymore, which does not happen in Bangladesh anymore. And I fear we are taking steps in that direction. We're not quite there, thankfully. On the EVM issue, therefore the EVM issue has to be handled very carefully. Unfortunately, we have two divides. There are those, and you rightly say, whenever you lose an election, there's a problem with EVM. Incidentally, the entire EVM debate was started by Mr. Advani. We forget that. And it was actually BJP's Rajya Sabha MP, now GVL Narasimha Rao, who actually wrote the first book questioning the EVMs. And the preface to the book was by Mr. Advani. We forget who started this entire debate. Before that, Mamata Banerjee had also protested against EVM when she lost an election. Next time she won, she was very happy with EVMs. So I see there is a lot of opportunism about these things, and we have to have a fair debate. The basics are this, to my mind. Number one, any electronic gadget in the world can be manipulated. Number two, of the two men who rule this country, no one has ever accused them of any ethics, ever. Number three, the Election Commission of India, as it stands today, I'm sorry, Qureshi Saab, it's become a joke. The Election Commission has no spine whatsoever. Now, the trouble is that these three things are put together by people to therefore conclude that therefore EVMs are being manipulated. Actually, from these three, it does not follow. And I've always been saying that EVM skeptics must bring evidence not only to show that EVMs can be manipulated, but they actually have been manipulated and the evidence has been sparse. Now, I've said this for the last 10 years, have lost many friends, have taken a lot of galis, और लोग कहते हैं अच्छा तुम तो इसी के दलाल, और इस देश में डिबेट का ऐसा कल्चर है that the moment I have any debate with you, you can never be accepted dalal and this and paid agent and things of that kind, which is what has happened. Having said all this, I must say that having watched elections now for 35 years, not as many as Mr. Chidambaram, but 35 years I've watched elections. There are three recent elections that really worry me. Madhya Pradesh last year, Haryana this year, and now Maharashtra. Something does not add up about their results.
No,
Something is fishy.
But Yogendra, with due regard, it cannot be that when the opposition doesn't do well, then it doesn't add up. If EVMs, if Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah wanted, they could have got their 400 seats.
Rajdeep, I must put it on record that when Mr. Modi won in 2014, and especially when he won in 2019, large number of critics and my friends said it was EVM. I went on record. I wrote to say no, it's public, it's popularity. Mr. Modi has been voted by people of India, whether you like it or not. Stop blaming the EVMs. Take the political responsibility. Do something about it. So at least I'm not one of those. Whenever Mr. Modi wins, then it's EVM. No. But there are three instances. We do not have evidence today. We may get it 6 months later. We may get it 20 years later in someone's autobiography. But there is something fishy about these three results. And I say it with all responsibility. I look at data. I look at data patterns. I look at anomalies. I do not just jump to these things. There's something fishy about these three state results. I do not know what. And I'm not saying EVM software. There could be several kinds of manipulations can take place. Something is fishy here.
Yes.
Rajdeep, it's not always conspiracy theory when the aam aadmi or the average person says that dal mein kuch kala hai. It doesn't always translate that the EVM has been manipulated. Like, I agree with Yogendra ji. I think the evidence is sparse and we don't have enough to know that they have or they haven't been. But when we're talking about the fairness of an electoral process, then there are a number of things that go into it. And an election must be fair, must also be seen to be fair. So the role of the Election Commission has been, as Yogendra ji said, a complete joke. I would go so far as to say that you can have no election commission, but this, what we have now, is not a no election commission. It is an election commission which is completely controlled by the government. So when you have, I mean, we all have seen the model code of conduct. When you saw in the 24 election, hate speech, when you saw Mr. Modi go and give that speech in Baswara, like Mr. Owaisi said, when you have this completely polarizing hate speech, this was not just saying, you know, you're an idiot or aap dalal ho. This was coming out, and this is pure hate speech aimed at religious polarization. Not a level playing ground, because if I were to say something, I would have an election commission show cause and probably be stopped from campaigning for the next 48 hours. So the BJP definitely have an edge when it comes to the election commission in that they're not stopped. The second, when it comes to a level playing field, is when you have the media. Now, the media is backing the BJP 10:1. The third is when it comes to resources. We saw how the BJP outspends every single other political party, I would say 20:1. When you look at electoral bonds, when you look at everything. So everything that makes up, and now if you look at just the three things, you look at the UP by-polls, and you saw the photos of the police sitting and telling people you can't come out to vote. That to me is not a fair process. So all of these things put together makes people feel like democracy is in danger and the electioneering process is in danger.
Okay.
Right? One more thing. When we saw during the 24 election, it didn't work for them, but the fact that Rajiv Kumar and his team agreed to a 90-day election process in the worst of the summer, and we had over 100 polling personnel dead, and then you come back and say, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Damn right it wasn't. So, when you have all of these things, obviously it takes away from faith in the electoral process.
I just want a moment want Mr. Chidambaram, because you've been a home minister and a finance minister, to respond to that. Would you support going back to ballot papers? I listed in my speech how I saw ballot boxes being stuffed in the early 1990s. Are you in favor of a return to the old system, given all these EVM skeptics that now exist around us?
Yeah, I admit that there are hundreds of EVM skeptics. Elon Musk is an EVM skeptic, and he says we should go back to the ballot paper. But I have had no bad experience with EVM. I can only speak of my experience, because I'm confined to a constituency on polling day and counting day. So I can't speak for 542 other constituencies. But there are enough EVM skeptics, and Elon Musk was on record saying we should abolish EVMs.
That's one of the changes in 2024, that now Indian politicians quote Elon Musk.
No.
But, I mean,
Point is, whether you like it or not, he's become the second most important man in the US. Now, should we go back to the ballot boxes? I have had bad experience with ballot boxes. Therefore, the answer is what we have suggested. The Supreme Court has not accepted. The answer is EVM speeds up counting. It eliminates invalid votes. But the answer is to have the digital ballot paper counted for 100%. Today they are counting 5 boxes per constituency. You keep 100% counting. It won't happen in every constituency where a candidate loses by 1 lakh vote or 2 lakh vote. He is not going to ask for a recount. But if the margin is narrow enough, he will ask for a recount. At that time, you count the digital voting, which is translated into an electronic ballot paper, which is dropped in the other box. Mm-hmm. You count it.
Okay.
So that's the answer to combining the speed of EVM and the accuracy of ballot paper.
Okay, so maybe there needs to be some attempt. Yes, very quickly, yes. Yes, Yogen.
See, I don't think it's necessary, and I completely agree with Mr. Chidambaram. There is no need to go back to paper ballot. What you need are two things. Number one, voters should be able to verify that the vote recorded is indeed the way she had voted. Right now, I can see, but I can't do anything. There should be a way of validation. It can be, and it should not be electronic. That should be manual. And number two, the counting should be physical parchi counting. The electronic machine can be used as a shortcut to begin with, but the authentic result has to be a result of physical counting of parchi. There are many ideals of democracy, but counting votes in 2 hours has never been a democratic ideal ever. That we take 24 hours, there's absolutely nothing wrong.
I want to point out ADR's report, which I mentioned in the book, actually shows 534 of the 543 constituencies, a mismatch between votes polled and votes counted. And that's in most cases, it's a very small amount, 1,000, 2,000 votes would not have influenced the verdict, but there is something wrong. And sadly, the Election Commission has not clarified that. But you picked up you and the BJP in support, or do you believe this is part of the denial mode?
Okay, let me go to Bengal. And I have worked very closely with Mamata Banerjee, and I still respect her a lot. Okay, I have no problem in telling that. She works very hard, like Narendra Modi. And she wins election in spite of whatever happens elsewhere. Because she is a leader who leads from the front. She has a great team and is 24/7, which I said. So whether it is ballot boxes, whether it's electronic voting, the people who are popular, those who are working hard, if you are not winning a match, then you say there's ball tempering. It doesn't work like that all the time. Please understand. Elon Musk also, if I quote him, yesterday only said that, thank God, India election counting is so very fast, and we should adopt that. So where are you going to stop it? Okay. And I think this is once and for all. Supreme Court also has given the judgment that please show us. So ultimately, if we do not have faith in Supreme Court also, then I think we have no faith in democracy.
Okay, let me move this on from EVMs. I think the jury is out, and the very fact that we are debating it in itself is, I think, important, that we are looking at it. The other issue I want to look at is the role of cash, caste, communalism. The 3 C's that in a way now are shaping Indian elections across this country. Asaduddin Owaisi, I mentioned this in my speech as well, the role of religion in politics is ending up dividing people, is creating the kind of vote bank politics that is becoming more and more toxified. So there will be BJP leaders who will say that when we say batoge to katoge, all we are saying is stay united. Because there are, that's how they look at it. Do you believe that there is an attempt being made on both sides to divide people and seek vote banks? And that, in a way, has led to the toxification of politics because religion is now such an important element.
In a lighter vein, what Dinesh Bhai just said, I think so Bumrah saw Modi in his dream before opting to bowl on that day, bat on that day. He was inspired to bat on a green Perth, fast-paced pitch. And also, I think the 13-year-old kid who got this big IPL contract, I think so Mr. Modi must have phoned. Take him or ED will come. We don't know. So, in a lighter vein, don't take it. Thirdly, Rajdeep, you see, the way, I'll answer your question, the way election commissioners are being appointed, how can you expect the elections to be free and fair?
But it was no different in the past. 1 minute. It's not as if all of this started. It's not as if in the Congress rule, Mr. Chidambaram's party didn't appoint or wasn't accused of appointing election commissioners who were seen as favorable to them.
Well, Mr. Chidambaram is qualified enough to answer a question. But as far as the present system is concerned, you don't want the CGI to be there. You want a committee comprising of the government to select the election commissioner. One. Secondly, is it possible to know the source code of that EVM? I'm not casting aspersions. Thirdly, how is cash moved around states? We don't move the cash. It is this man in uniform who is very, very close to the ruling party, who can even give life for that chief minister. That cash is moved around. You are wrong. It's not the political members. It is the other way around. How do you stop that? How do you stop those government functionaries from moving this cash around in a state? The election commission knows everything. Who's moving around this cash? Where is this going? You need level playing field. That is not happening. And then we have Aadhaar card that you can blame Mr. Chidambaram's government. Now, on basis of Aadhaar card, I know where to give money. So sophistication has happened And
You mean which individual should be given the money?
yeah, and then you have this this Ladli Behna scheme. I know, as you rightly said in your lecture, people are, you don't need to give money within after model code of conduct. You start giving them before. So, and then the worst thing is this first past the post system. I blame Nehru for that. I hope I'll not be,
You prefer proportional
No,
representation.
see, where is the value of my vote? My MLA in Malegaon won with 180 votes. It was a nightmare for me. But the first past the post system, and then you rightly said about the constituency having 30 lakh voters. I have 24 lakh voters. What do I do? Now coming back, take this, juxtapose this with communalism. Of course, when you have the Prime Minister speaking this language, batonge to katoge, is it for the whole Indians or is it for a particular community? Ek hai to safe hai, is it for the whole Indians or is it for a particular community? When you say Dharam youth, or jihad, who are you addressing to? Are you addressing it to all the Indians who believe in diversity, pluralism, or it's a particular community? And lastly, in Aurangabad, there are videos wherein a BJP member is surrounded on polling day by 200 women and is giving 500 rupees. The election commission is sleeping. Had it been someone else, I think so a repolling would have been ordered.
But we've seen that in other states, Karnataka, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh.
No.
Cash is not
No.
something
When
again
you
that
have
started
when
in
you have a
2014.
video
Yes.
on an important junction place in Aurangabad, a BJP leader is distributing money, surrounded by 500 women around him. I don't blame the women, see, because Modi has made everyone poor. So they want money. Now 500 rupees is a great thing for them. Now election commission is not doing anything. And a person who's the deputy chief minister of Maharashtra takes my name and says, OIC, Dharam youth, or jihad. Where is jihad in elections? Where is Dharam youth?
Because you're also accused of catering to a particular community. When I travel with you in Aurangabad, you're also playing vote bank politics.
Rajdeep, I know whenever you see me, you have to ask this question to balance your, whatever balance you have to do. So, you quote a speech which I have said on these lines. During the election campaign, when the model code of conduct is in place, and as Mohi has rightly said, in the by-elections to UP, you have a policeman showing a licensed revolver to a woman who wants to come out and vote. So where is the election commission? So that is where the selection of the election commissioner is very important.
Okay, let me just,
I just
sir, respond to two things. This ek hai to safe hai, batoge to katoge are seen by the likes of Mr. Owaisi and many others as essentially communal dog whistles. That it is designed to divide.
Rajdeep, we are underestimating the voters. The voters today in India are very, very sharp and intelligent. Please understand, okay, you give money, but he'll ultimately vote for the person he wants to vote for. It's not that somebody is watching. I've given you X amount of money. Why have you voted somewhere else? It doesn't happen like that. So again, denial mode. Again, on a lighter mode, that level playing field. Is he trying to say that if there are 300 seats in a particular state, 150 आप रखो, 150 हम रखते हैं? ऐसा नहीं होता है. Elections are elections. I have fought many elections.
How do you respond to this batoge to katoge?
Yeah, but again, leave it to the voters.
Ek hai to civil.
Leave it to the voters. Don't underestimate the voters. First of all, let me tell you, how can we forget a time when parties used to go to Imam of Jama Masjid and Imam used to give a fatwa that this time we are going to vote for such thing. It has happened. But in a secular country,
One minute,
in a secular country, there cannot be a minority and there cannot be a majority based on religion. There could be a minority if somebody is old, if somebody has some other physical problem, if somebody is poor. I can understand based on that. was based on religion. You cannot have a minority and a majority.
Okay.
So all along when we were talking
Yes,
about a minority vote bank, that was secular. And now if you talk about the majority vote bank, this is communal. I think we have to get out of that. And lastly, I'll tell
Yes.
you, ultimately things were voted on development. People can laugh and say no. But every time, whenever something is given by the government, it is all done by electronic. And nobody is watching it is going to which community, which caste, where. It's all done absolutely level playing field.
Okay.
You can't deny that, right?
Okay, you know the point he makes, and this is a long-standing
Rajdeep, don't
argument.
tell us the
It's not
point
about
he makes.
balancing.
We
No,
get
just
the
a minute,
point
ma'am.
he makes.
It's not about balancing. It's
we get
about
the point he makes.
No,
Let
no,
us
he-
answer his point. Don't explain it, Rajdeep.
no. He's
We get the point he makes. Let us come back with an answer to that. You don't need to come and tell us the point he
he
makes.
says.
I mean, I know
the
you're
point-
wearing a-
the charge which is made against your party, and indeed he says secular parties, is that when you play minority vote bank politics, that's fine.
1 second.
Moment majority vote bank politics, we call it communal.
One
is
second.
how he
One
responds.
second. Like I said, don't explain what he said. We actually had, this is the problem when you change parties, you actually get very confused with what your thought process is. So if you were once in a party that actually, if you were once in a party like I am, where you define secularism and you think secular,
Define
One
it for me.
second. So, secularism is, as I understand it, is where all your fundamental rights defined in the Constitution are guaranteed to every single person, irrespective of what religion they follow. Your right to life, your liberty, in very simple. That is the basis of our Constitution. To me, that means the fact that I have access to this water. If we are two poor people and there's one drop of water, I will have equal access to it. My poverty may define me, but my religion won't. If there is one school, my poverty will think it. If government is giving something, all access cannot be defined on the basis of religion. That is what secularism means. Now, unfortunately, with all due respect, Mr. Trivedi is my senior in the party. I have the greatest respect for him. But you cannot be sitting here as a card-carrying member of the BJP and actually tell us that we are in a secular country. We are living in a country where the dharma and the sort of proclaimed idea of this government is to have a Hindu Rashtra. That's the whole idea. The idea is that we don't want to be a secular country. We just had a PIL in the Supreme Court, which was yesterday, which said that India shouldn't be a secular country. That the word secular was added in the preamble. I mean, the BJP lives and dines off this, that India isn't a secular country. We've brought in a CAA, which is seeking to define our immigrant policy, which, as far as India is concerned, should be on people, on poor people, on disadvantaged people having the right to live in our country and seek refuge. But we have our cutoff is not humanitarian grounds, our cutoff is religious grounds. These things have made us all very ashamed on a global stage. So please don't sit here and tell us that the BJP government follows secularism in any form. I'm sorry, sir, you are then in the wrong party. If you still believe that, I'm happy to come back to ours.
No, but Ms. Moitra, just
Yeah.
one final time to press the point, because this is, an important point. The fact is, as Mr. Trivedi pointed out, there was a time when political parties did go to the Shahi Imam and seek his support for votes, community votes. We've
Right.
seen that in Maharashtra as well this time. That particular ulemas,
So
on their
wouldn't
own
people in
perhaps
Goa,
made-
wouldn't
So
people in
what
Goa
is
go
the
to the
difference-
church?
What is the difference between
One
that
minute, one
and
minute.
what you say is
One
your
minute.
definition of secularism?
1 minute. I'll tell you. I was an MLA before. When I'm on my campaign trail, I will have a meeting with the bishops. Krishnanagar has, my Teherta subdivision has 2 to 3% Christian vote. I will reach out to the Christian community. They will have tea for me. I will go and meet them. I will have the Matuas from East Bengal, a large part in my constituency. I will go and meet their leaders. If the minority, the imams have a meeting, I will go and meet them. What I will do is meet everyone. Please, there is a big difference between, for us, what we do is, I would want everyone's votes. I would want the Christian vote. The BJP is the first party in India that actually believes that they in fact only want to win on the Hindu vote. And they say that I want this exclusionary politics to continue. हम मुसलमान को MP नहीं देंगे. हम राज्यसभा में मुख्तार अब्बास नकवी को नहीं लाएंगे. हम जफर इस्लाम को 2 बार रिनॉमिनेट नहीं करेंगे, क्योंकि हम दिखाना चाहते हैं कि हम इनके बिना जीत सकते हैं और हम कुर्सी पे बैठ सकते हैं. That's the difference. That we have not seen before. The BJP candidate against me, Rajdeep, did not go to a single, I campaigned 14 hours a day, she campaigned 4 hours a day. Because she only went to the Hindu booths. There was a difference, right?
Yes.
I want to support Mahua. The BJP has not fielded a Muslim candidate in 3 Gujarat State Assembly elections. The BJP has not fielded a Muslim candidate in 2 UP elections, although the Muslims are 20%. In the last Maharashtra election, the BJP did not field a single Muslim candidate in 288 constituencies.
That's because the BJP says that Muslims don't vote for our party. Now, Mr. Owaisi is not going to field, for example, a Hindu candidate in Aurangabad Central. He will field Imtiaz Jalil.
You know, I am ready to give ticket to you. Will you contest for my party? No, come on.
Then why would you want...
On record, I am saying this.
Then why would you want a non-Muslim on the Waqf board?
That's okay for applause.
If the Muslims, then why would you want a non-Muslim on the
Mr.
Waqf
Owaisi,
board?
you're not going to give me the ticket. Let's be clear.
Rajdeep, you see, you must do your homework properly.
No, the same thing.
No, listen to me. I mean, when you see me, I don't know what happens to you. So you know, no. That is the national flag also. You cannot appropriate that.
Yeah.
So we do give tickets to non-Muslims. So you cannot say we don't give. The question that has been raised by Mahua Moitra and Mr. Chidambaram is, BJP has completely marginalized the biggest minority of this country. Correct. Socially, educationally, politically, and they are using the full force of the law to ensure that they become second-class citizens. That is the difference.
Okay. You want to respond to that one time, and then I'll move to my final segment.
Minority, majority, they're all Indians. The minority has to come back. They have to come out. They have got to come out.
Come back
and
to
say
our party,
we are part
honestly.
of the majority. How can I know Arif Mohammad Khan?
Yes.
Arif Mohammad Khan always used to say, what is this minority? I am part of majority. I think time has come when, they should stop that I am not given the fair treatment. I think today you have to see the education. Ultimately, what counts in a country is the level of education, level of health, and how well you are as far as competing with others are concerned. If you are always given the crunches, and I must tell you, if most of the Indians today are there in all the multinational companies, they are heading. How come they are heading? Because there is something in us कि हस्ती हमारी मिट्टी नहीं कुछ है बात हम में. So I again come back, get out of this denial mode, and I know it's your book. I know what kind of people were there, but still, as a member of BJP, I'm very proud, and I said that no, get out of this. Please come and join.
Sir, it's interesting. Just a minute. It's interesting he mentioned. Audience should know. It's interesting he mentioned Arif Mohammad Khan because I see that as a signal election of how India has changed. In 1980, Arif Mohammad Khan won an election from Barech or Kanpur. Barech, and in those days, for a Muslim to win for a Hindu constituency, Hindu-dominated constituency, was not seen as unusual. Today, it is impossible for a Muslim to win from a Hindu-dominated constituency, and that's why the Congress party also in Maharashtra did not give a single Muslim a ticket during the Lok Sabha election. Because you realize somewhere, and that's how what you said at the start, Mr. Chidambaram, politics has moved to the right, because now it's not possible for a Muslim to win from a Hindu-dominated constituency, which was considered in the 70s and 80s as something that could happen.
Can I correct you, Raj? No, Rajdeep. Can I correct you? Maulana Abul Kalam Azad.
Sir,
listen to me. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was told to contest from Rampur.
That's right.
Number one, remember that.
Yes.
Secondly, may I remind my honorable friend that please read Article 29 and 30. It talks about minorities, religion, and allow me to complete, sir. Allow me to complete. Today's Constitution Day, this country celebrates every religion. This country has no religion. Equality among equals or equality among unequals. You have to understand all these things. You just cannot say, no minority. This country has Article 29, 30, followed by 25, 26. and 29, right to culture. I know these are all very alien to BJP, but this is part of the basic structure of our constitution.
Okay, let me.
I think I must come.
Sure.
Please understand, if BJP is winning the election, they are winning because of the culture. Because of the very culture. And sabhyata hai, to aap jeetenge. And that is what now the voters are saying through. And please understand, you may have a different viewpoint. You're quite entitled for that. But if you go and ask, especially in Gujarat, the Muslims are very happy. They said we were never received.
I am surprised Dinesh Bhai has not been brought to Rajya Sabha.
Today,
Dinesh Bhai resigned. He has not come back. Modi has not made him MP.
Yogendra, I'll give you one word and then I want to open it to a few audience questions before we conclude. Go ahead.
I didn't want to comment much on Dinesh ji. मुझे लगा अभी नए आए हैं, कुछ तो कहना पड़ेगा पार्टी में. But I was very concerned about his.
पुराने हैं हम, कल्चर में बहुत पुराने हैं, नए नहीं है.
बीजेपी में थोड़ा
पार्टी नहीं होगी, कल्चर बहुत पुराना है मेरा.
हाँ, मैं उसी पे
बहुत पुराना कल्चर है.
जी, मैं वही सोच रहा था कि वो घुसपैठिया कहना, सब यहाँ पे मंच से सब कीड़ा कहना, टर्माइट कहना और इसको कल्चर कहना, दिनेश जी को क्या कुछ करना पड़ता है. पर आई वाज वेरी कंसर्न्ड अबाउट हिज फ्यूचर इन द पार्टी.
पर योगेंद्र जी,
एक मिनट सुन तो लीजिए, अब तो सुन
बताइए
लीजिए.
योगेंद्र जी,
आपने कल्चर की बात कही, सुन तो लीजिए.
चुनाव आप क्यों नहीं जीत रहे
सर?
क्यों नहीं जीत रहे आप?
सर, जिस दिन ये तय हो जाए,
क्यों नहीं जीत रहे? हम चाहते हैं कि आप जीतो.
दिनेश जी, इसका भी मैं जवाब दे देता हूँ. मैं देता हूँ जवाब दिनेश जी. जिस दिन ये तय हो जाएगा कि इलेक्शन विक्ट्री इज इक्वल टू कल्चर, हम उस दिन कुछ और करेंगे इस दुनिया में और कुछ काम करना शुरू करेंगे. बट आई वाज वेरी कंसर्न्ड अबाउट व्हाट यू सेड, बिकॉज आई वाज कंसर्न्ड अबाउट हाउ योर पार्टी में टेक ए व्यू ऑफ व्हाट यू आर सेइंग. यू सेड देयर इज नथिंग लाइक माइनॉरिटी, है ही नहीं माइनॉरिटी तो कुछ. नाउ योर पार्टी हैज बीन वेरी कंसर्न्ड अबाउट माइनॉरिटीज इन बांग्लादेश. योर पार्टी इज सो कंसर्न्ड अबाउट माइनॉरिटीज इन अफगानिस्तान, इन पाकिस्तान. पार्टी नाराज हो जाएगी आपसे ऐसी बातें कहने से. प्लीज, आई एम वेरी कंसर्न. बट ऑन ए मोर सीरियस नोट, राजदीप, लुक, कोर्टिंग पर्टिकुलर कम्युनिटीज फॉर पर्पसेस ऑफ इलेक्शंस इज नथिंग न्यू. Go back to 50s, you'll get it. Caste communities courting is nothing new. Secular politics in India has not been free of flaws. या हिंदी में कहे तो कोई दूध के धुले नहीं है. इन्होंने बहुत पाप किए हैं सेकुलर लोगों ने हिंदुस्तान में, है ना. But this kind of targeting of a community to start a hate campaign. If BJP quietly believed that, all right, we know we don't get votes from this community, as many political parties in this country know, that we don't get votes from this particular community, we get only 5% vote. So many parties know that this is the case. That's one thing. Quoting others a little more vigorously is another thing. But launching a hate campaign and using state machinery, using everything at command, and using Godi media to spread this hatred in the country, that's altogether different. And I don't expect Dinesh ji to be able to say it. I'm sure when the cameras are off, he would be able to recognize it. A year ago, he used to recognize it. That to me is the ultimate crime. That to me is what BJP, that to me is defiling the constitution that we seek to celebrate today.
Okay. Let me on that note, get in a few audience questions. Mr. Dushyant Dave is there. He's a permanently angry young man at the Supreme Court. Now, from one Gujarati to another, hold the mic. You all are both Gujaratis.
Who says we must forget the difference between majority and minority? I don't think Mr. Trivedi or his colleagues in the BJP have ever read the Constituent Assembly debates. It was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, their icon, who was the chairman of the Minority Committee during the drafting of the Constitution. And Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, when he presented the report of the Minority Committee, said, and this is very important, that, and he told us, the Hindus, that put yourself in the shoes of the minority community and realize how you are treating them. And then you will realize the pain that they suffer. He says it is on the day when you will realize this that the difference between the majority and minority will disappear. Now this is, unfortunately, Mr. Modi and BJP would like to have a 3,000 crore statue of Mr. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, but they don't want to follow his ideals. Secondly, Rajdeep, you said Sahir Ludhianvi, fir subah hogi. Let me remind you, and with great respect to each one of the panelists on the dais whom I know and personally respect, that Sahir also said, जिन्हें नाज है हिंद पर वो कहाँ है? The real problem of India today is that we don't have people who can lead this country. We are the victims, the citizens. We are the victims today, and the entire country has been hijacked by the political class across the party lines. We have no say left, and we are left to fend for ourselves.
Okay.
And this is a
No,
real
you don't
challenge.
agree. Mawa Moital, let her respond to you. There is this belief
No, just
that
a sec. One more point.
politicians are disconnected from citizens.
Rajdeep,
Yes.
one more point. The thing that you have missed the most in your book and this discussion is the role that has been played by the judiciary in last
I was
2
just going
years.
to come to that.
And that is the biggest challenge that this country is facing.
No, that I'm
it's
waiting
not
for
the
you,
ele-
Mr. Dave, to write that book.
My book will never be published, I can assure you. Even Harper won't publish it.
Okay.
But this is, unfortunately what is happening is that election, these hate speeches, for example, by Mr. Modi during the election of 2024. I mean, if Mr. Chandrachud, who has now fortunately retired, he could take suo moto action in a unfortunate case of a rape and murder in West Bengal. But he had no courage to take suo moto action in a case like that. He could have picked up, suo moto and told election commission, why is it that you are not doing anything about
Okay.
it?
That,
Now,
you made statements, not a question, but that's that's why I said you're the angry young man of the Supreme Court.
But no, I mean, this is something which all of you are missing. And
Okay.
it must be remembered.
Yes, you want to quickly respond.
To say that the political class, I take umbrage at that. I mean, because when you say the political class is solely to blame, I mean, I said that, I put up my hand before his third point. And when you say जिन्हें नाज है हिंद पे वो कहाँ है, I want to say यहाँ है, यहाँ है, यहाँ है. We are here. Of course we are here. And I think at least what the judiciary, the media and the judiciary are probably more to blame for the current state of India's sort of, hate-filled narrative than politics. And I'll just take three things. If you just take what is happening in India today, if you take the Places of Worship Act 1991, we have seen the judiciary, we have seen the bench come out with egregious orders in violation of that, which is why we're seeing the problem in Sambal. We have seen instances in Manipur, for example, where the problem with the match was lit by an unreasoned order, an ex parte order of a lower court of the High Court judge. So the judiciary hasn't really covered themselves with glory. And what I would also like to say today from this platform, and I will continue to say it in Parliament next week, is that for every TEDx lecture and for every sort of, National Juridical Academy lecture that every judge does, if you could have 0.1% of that in your orders, I think you would make India a much better place.
Okay. Let's get a young person there. Yes, young man.
Hello.
Sawal पूछेगा.
Yes. My question is for Barrister Assaduddin Owaisi. Sir, in India or in the world, every politician has their parameters on which they define their success in terms of electoral gains or increasing the vote share. And you have been leading your movement since 3 decades, if I'm not wrong, and there is not much electoral difference at the national level. So apart from electoral gains, what are your parameters on which you define your success and your legacy?
What he seems to suggest is for a politician, at the moment, it's all about electoral success. Beyond that, what? Do you do improvement in the livelihoods of the people? We've seen in many of the parts of the country, Muslims are ghettoized, conditions, infrastructure is crumbling. Should that be the way you judge your success? Or ki chunav jeet gaye, 1 se 2 seat aa gaye?
It includes everything. It includes winning elections, fighting elections, and never giving up the fight against, ensuring that you get the constitutional fundamental rights. That is very important. So all these things are very important.
Okay. 2 more questions. Yes, the gentleman there has been raising his hand. Yes, sir. 2 last questions. 1 here, 1 this side.
आपकी ऑडियंस के लिए बता दूं, बात हिंदू मुसलमान से आगे चली गई है. जो भी डोमिनेंट कास्ट है, हरियाणा में जाट नॉन जाट, महाराष्ट्र में मराठा नॉन मराठा, गुजरात में पटेल नॉन पटेल, यूपी बिहार में यादव नॉन यादव, झारखंड और छत्तीसगढ़ में आदिवासी नॉन आदिवासी, ये घास खत्म हो गई है, हरे वाली घास खत्म। अब जो है अपने ऊपर ही जो है बुलडोजर चलना शुरू होने वाला है, ये स्थिति है। इसके ऊपर आप आगे विचार करिए कि ये लोग हिंदुत्व में बचेंगे या ये हिंदुत्व से कहीं पलायन कर दें।
ठीक है, चलिए, let me get a question. Is there a lady, a question from a... Okay, yes. 1 minute. Yeah, very quickly.
Proudly say that he is giving free ration to about 80 crore people. So is it contradictory at one stage you say that हम तो विश्व गुरु बन गए हैं, और you take pride in telling people that 80 crore of our citizens are still dependent on free ration? Why is it not that Mr. Modi talks and say कि पिछले साल 80 करोड़ थे, हमने वो कम करके इस बार 70 करोड़ कर दिए, अब हमने कम करके उनको 60 कर दिया, अब कम करके हमने उनको 50 करोड़ कर दिया. So why is that? And another question.
Okay, one question.
Yeah, sure.
You want to quickly take that? That, you spoke about aspirational India. I just went, I saw it in Maharashtra. You go to Yavatmal. Yavatmal has one private factory of Raymond's which makes jeans. There's no other form of productive employment today in Yavatmal. In Amravati, as I said, a farmer's wife committed suicide. A farmer committed suicide because he couldn't pay a 1 lakh loan. I sometimes wonder, where do our politicians across the board live? The reality is that people are struggling at the bottom of the pyramid. I make the point in my book, particularly post-COVID, which is why a lot of incumbents have lost across this country. Mr. Modi actually survived what is otherwise an anti-incumbency across the world. But to say that, every sab kuch changa hai, the world, we are a Vishwa Guru or we are a 5 trillion economy, tell that to the woman in Amravati, or tell that to the young people in Yavatmal who have no jobs. In Solapur, everyone is leaving Solapur. It's the highest migration rate in the country. And this is Maharashtra, not a so-called Bimaru state. Do you think politics needs to be more realistic about the reality on the ground, sir?
On a larger note, and whatever I have said, I must tell you in the beginning, not only as a BJP person, but as somebody who has seen India, who has contested election, and I am talking as you would understand.
Okay.
And when you are talking about aspirational India, are we going to say that we are finished, we are gone, we are dead?
No, is it a dream? Is it a dream?
No, I'll tell you, I'll take you back to COVID period. India is one of the countries which really tackled COVID so very well. America is still paying the price for it. America is still paying the price for it. All those people who are walking and the free ration, please understand, this is a country which is very complex. And every state has a different country. But I'll tell you in conclusion, you may have a side. Somebody may be a BJP supporter, somebody may be a Congress supporter, somebody may like Modi, somebody may hate Modi. That's okay, that's democracy. And they are well within their right to do it. But the fact is, today is the Constitution Day. And my Bible is the 4 volume of the Constituent Assembly debate. And I very, very strongly recommend that every college must have. I don't know about the schools. At that particular Constituent Assembly, it went on for 3 years, not a day of disruption, not a single, and I'm not trying to blame one party or the other, not one day of disruption. You could shut your eyes and put your hand on any individual there, that person belonging to any community, any religion, any party would be capable of leading the country. But today, unfortunately, if you see the parliament, cutting off Chris Patil, criminals, hardcore criminals. But the fact is, the society is accepting that. People like us have lost relevance. I have no hesitation in telling. Because when it comes to party tickets, it's only winnability. Every party wants somebody who can do whatever to win the election. So fact of life is, no point blaming a political party, society also has to rise up. If supposing
Okay.
there is a problem that we...
I've run out of time.
Yeah.
I want to give Mr. Chidambaram a final word. What do you think will change between 24 and 29? You see, in the 24 book, I suggest that the Congress survived. They didn't revive, they survived. And, your party, your leader went on yatras. But there's a sense that the Congress party is the principal opposition party. So long as it remains as weak as it is, we are in the age of the BJP, which you said at the start. You called it the age of right, the cultural right. Either way, how do you see the future in the next 5-10 years? Would you accept we are entering a dominant period of the BJP over the next 10 years?
I don't accept that. At the moment, the BJP seems dominant. And the rightward shift has bolstered its confidence. But I don't think it's irreversible. I think we have 4 years and 6 months to reverse it. But we need new ideas, new ideators, and new young leaders.
A new leadership? Would you look at a Congress beyond the Gandhis at all?
Who is the leader of my party can't be decided by anyone except the members of my party. Can you decide who will be the leader of my party? The members of my party alone can decide who will be the
What's
leader
your
of the
view?
party. My view is what the workers say. And if I go to my constituency, and I've said those to you privately, if I go to my constituency today and assemble a random sample of 100 workers and ask them who should be the leader, I mean, besides nobody will mention your name, 95 out of 100 will mention Rahul Gandhi.
Rajdeep, sorry, Rajdeep,
Yes.
to interrupt very rudely. I'm sorry. I adore you, but you, it's the second event I'm coming. You've got to look beyond the Congress BJP paradigm. Opposition politics in India doesn't include just the Congress. We are sitting here today. We have beaten the sort of trend. We have bucked the trend.
So
against
answer
the
my
BJP.
question. Is the future then the regional parties taking on the
It could
Congress?
well be. It could well be.
I saw one of your leaders the other day saying Mamata Banerjee should be the leader of the India Alliance. Is that just rhetoric?
No, I mean, look, I'm not sitting here saying that it is a reason, but that's not the point. The point is you can't judge India today as just a Congress versus BJP.
Okay.
I mean, and every trend that the Congress necessarily has with the BJP isn't what the trend, for example, that we see in Bengal or that we may see in other states. So, you have to wake up to that.
Okay.
And
You're a
treat
trend-
opposition politics as not as one Congress versus BJP.
Yogendra Yadav, you're a trend spotter. What do you see between... I don't know whether I'll be around. I don't know whether I'll be around to write a 29 book or whether there is a book ahead. I don't know. But if there was to be a 29 book, what do you think the title could be?
May I suggest that you should not write the 29 book? Instead. No, I'm serious. I mean, I love this book and we've not had a discussion about it. But instead, I would want Rajdeep Sardesai to write a book about the Indian media, not just a chapter. Rajdeep, you have known this. No, it's a very good chapter. Everyone should read this chapter. He's not as diplomatic in the book as he is when he's conducting these discussions.
I
Rajdeep,
get boxed on all sides. But that's
but Rajdeep, it's a very serious thing that I'm saying. You are among the very few people in India who have watched, especially the television industry, grow right from the beginning. You have seen its decline, you have seen its fall. And once you write the book, of course, no one would have you on television. But you would have done a service to the coming generations. Someone should record the truth. You have the courage. You do plain speaking, and someone should do plain speaking about what Indian media has done in the last 10 years, last 20 years, I would say, especially in the last 10 years, because, and India is not the only country where it happens, but about India, one can certainly say media is one of the principal problems of Indian democracy today, more than the political class. I don't belong to that class. But just to continue the point that Mahua had made, now that we are expanding from Congress to regional parties, etc., may I actually say that the future may not lie in any of the political parties, because to my mind, the task of saving this country from the dismantling project which is going on, it's a project to dismantle Indian Republic, frankly. Political parties have played a very minor role so far, almost reluctantly. Public has pushed them to play a role, and they have come to play a role. Do remember, between 2019 and 24, the principal opposition to what Mr. Modi was doing did not come from the Sansad, it came from the Sadak. It is on the street. It is, to my mind, when I look at the future, I look at social movements, I look at people's movements, peasant movements, Adivasi, Dalit, those who've actually taken the risk and fought. In the last instance, allow me to end on a journalistic flourish. Republic is saved not by parties, certainly not by judiciary, all over the world, not by legislatures. Republic is saved by the public.
You know, Yogendra Yadav, I appreciate you giving us your insights. I know that the media is a soft target, and I hold no brief for the media, but the very fact that I could write this book while being in the mainstream media is still a credit to the organization that I am with. It is not easy for India today to have someone like Rajdeep Sardesai. That they have it is that there are still spaces. And I would still like to believe that more can be done. I hope that we see many more organizations. And with new technologies, I'm sure that there will be spaces. I write about it in the book, and I said it in the lecture, that digital media and social media offer many more opportunities to democratizing spaces. So I think we all need to introspect. Politicians need to introspect. We in the media, Mr. Dave and Mr. Chidambaram and the judiciary. And indeed, we as a people need to decide the kind of leaders we elect, the reasons we elect them. But I don't know whether there's a 2029 book, but I'm happy that I was able to complete the trilogy. And I'm even happier that you all came here and spoke so openly and candidly on this very special day. I'm sure if the great Jawaharlal Nehru was alive, he would be very happy, and he certainly wouldn't have adjourned the House. The one thing, even if he was criticized, he would have allowed you to speak. If you look at the parliamentary debates of the 50s, 60s, what really stands out is that Parliament was never adjourned. They would speak to each other, never at each other. And maybe that's something that we as a nation need to also discover as a people. Thank you all very much for joining me on this special occasion.